All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the open board meeting of the Fraser Valley Regional District. Before I call the meeting to order, I'd like to start the meeting by recognizing the homeland of the 30 First Nation communities of this area that we call the Fraser Valley Regional District. Important decisions that we make at this level, the local government level, can affect First Nation communities in a great many ways. So as part of our collective responsibility, I commit that we continually examine the work that we do to ensure that our project plans, initiatives, and discussions are guided by the principles of inclusion, collaboration, and reconciliation. And with that, I'd like to call the meeting to order. The first item, Ms. Kinnaman.
Looking for approval of the agenda, and late items.
Thank you. It's going to be that kind of meeting, is it? All right. Apparently, we're not going to be able to either close or adjourn the meeting tonight, so we're in trouble. Thank you. It's moved by Director Popov, seconded by Director Pranger. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor. Opposed, if any. The item carries. Next item.
4.1 is the draft Fraser Valley Regional District Board meeting minutes of April 27th, 2023.
Thank you. That's moved by Director Seaman, second by Director Clute. Discussion on the minutes. Any errors, omissions, or questions? Seeing none, all in favor. Opposed, if any. The item carries. Next item.
Section 5 are the committee minutes for information and matters arising. Happy to separate any of those 5.1 through 5.3.
Thank you. A number of different minutes. Any questions on any of those as information items? Don't see any. Next item.
6.1 is the Growing Communities Fund. There is a motion for your consideration.
Thank you. It's moved by Director Popov, seconded by Director Shahal. Discussion, Director Conroy.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Sorry.
And welcome this
Thank
evening.
I'm so sorry. I'm just getting caught up in everything while he's away. I just had a quick question about, it said the money was to be used for shortfall projects. And I was just curious, why was the Hatzick Prairie water upgrade not on there? Because it had a shortfall.
That's a great question. I'll go back over to staff, Ms. Kinnaman.
Sure. So through the chair, the reason that the projects that were put forward were chosen was based on a perspective of financial risk for projects that were already currently underway and had existing grant funds attached to it. In particular, one project is at a point of failure. And so projects such as the Hatzick water system was not at a point of failure. So there's a different type of risk. The Electoral Area Services Committee has asked staff to put forward another list of projects going back into the annals of history and bringing forward projects that perhaps were unable to go forward based on lack of funding. And we will be bringing forward that list of projects to the July cycle.
Okay, so from my understanding, it's not necessarily exhaustive, this initial $2 million allocation, but just to address those pieces of infrastructure or projects that were within the highest risks that are immediate concern. But then we'll have another kick at the can to look at some of those other projects throughout the region.
Sorry, one more question. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Just when you're deciding, do you have a criteria when later on how you're going to decide where the funds are being speak?
Yeah,
sorry.
Director Conroy.
Yeah, sorry, getting used to the microphone.
Yeah, all good. You can actually even pull it down a little bit closer. Yeah, there we go.
Sorry, when you go back to go over the funds, is there a process like specific criteria you're going to use to decide what the next projects are going to be, or?
Through the chair to alternate director Conroy. Staff is still working through this process. It's not even really been a week since we had the direction to go back to the drawing board. I expect that we will be hearing from each of the electoral area directors about various projects that perhaps were unable to go forward due to lack of funding, and we will be bringing that forward for the committee's discussion. At this point in time, the projects that you see in the report before you are the projects that staff are providing as a recommendation, but ultimately it's this board's decision on how they wish to allocate those funds.
Thank you. Director Siemens.
Thank you. This isn't that I'm opposed to any particular project, but I guess the question is, if this funding wasn't here, and these projects were over budget and had cost overruns, what would the process be? I'm just wondering, like, is the service area, do they have the ability to borrow, or how would we manage that if this wasn't here?
Sure. Through the chair to Director Siemens, perhaps it would be best if we separate out the two projects because I think they should be treated a little bit differently. In the case of the Cultus Lake wastewater treatment plant, there is a service area for that, of course, and there is a project that has been estimated and it's on the agenda. If we did not have access to this funding, we would have to go back to the community and consider other opportunities that might be available in order for us to get that funding. Unlike an emergency repair, in which case you would just have to go forward and do the work and then recapture those funds from the service area within the next calendar year. In this case, we may have to seek other alternative sources of revenue that might come from Cultus Lake Park Board, or perhaps go back out to referendum to the community to seek further borrowing. The key issue here, though, again, is that this is a project that has been desperately needed. The existing system is at the point of failure. We really cannot afford to take 6 months, 9 months, a year to go back out to the community. And if the community does not agree to the borrowing, we would be in a pretty difficult situation.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And then you were going to separate the two out. So could you just expand on how that would work for the Hope?
Sure. My apologies through the chair to Director Siemens. With respect to the Hope Heat Recovery Project, staff are going to be bringing forward a project update report in the coming months on that item. There will be some options available to the board in terms of how to go forward in terms of the scope of that work. Because we were bringing the grant allocation report to the table, we needed to at least flag this project as a possible candidate for the funding. It's possible that this board may choose not to go in a different direction, in which case we would reallocate those funds towards something else. So there isn't the same level of criticality, I would say, at this point in time, today in May, for the Hope Heat Recovery Project. But again, just recognizing that we do need to have these funds allocated by year end, and all of the funds need to have been expended within 5 years. So in addition to meeting all of the grant criteria, we have to have at least flagged where this money is going to go by the end of 2023.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I can understand the Cultus Lake one, and this is, again, I'm no criticism of staff or Hope, but I'm just wondering, in the spirit of fairness to other areas, would it be wise maybe for us to just approve the Cultus Lake one at this point and put the other one back in? I just think for fairness and better comprehensive understanding, so that there is maybe a level playing field. From my perspective, I think I would be more comfortable with that, but I'll see what my colleagues think.
Okay. Well, that wasn't, I didn't hear an official amendment on the table yet. Are you comfortable, Director Siemens, with continuing the discussion on the motion before us, and then you'll determine whether or not you'd like to bring an amendment forward? Is that okay?
Yes, that would be fine.
Sure. Is that your intent? Yep. I've got Director Barkman.
You spurred a question when you said we don't have a lot of time. Was this something that, because of circumstance, or why did we get to the position we're in where it's an ASAP job? Like, was there not enough valuation year prior, or did something else happen to get to us to this point?
Through the chair to Director Barkman, the Cultus Lake wastewater treatment plant project has been one that the FBRD has been challenged with for quite a number of years. There are a number of reports that perhaps offline I could provide them to you. It would sort of take quite a lot of time for me to go back through the history of that, but unfortunately, due to some cost escalations and some challenges with the project itself, we find ourselves in this position today that we need an extra $1 million.
One of the key triggers, Director Barkman, was waiting for a substantial provincial grant, which we only received fairly recently, which was enabled the project to kind of move forward to the stage where we're at right now. So that was one of the key kind of points where we were kind of waiting for.
I guess the question I should have clarified a little bit was more to do with the Hatzik one where.
Oh, the Hatzik water, the one that Director Conroy brought up.
Yeah.
Why didn't we pursue?
Well, it just
that
sounded like it was a fairly, we got to get out kind of project. And if we're waiting for funds from the government, federal or provincial, versus we have to get it done because there's issues.
Yeah, and Ms. Kinnaman, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Hatzik water system was at a very different stage in terms of where it was at. Did that get other provincial grant funding assigned to that, or no?
Chair Lum, we could have our Director of Engineering speak to that project.
Sure.
But just sort of at a high level, this project was actually stopped by the community, I would say about 6 or 7 years ago. Probably 2018 would be my memory. The community decided they did not want to go forward with that project, and there was no grant funding available, and they did not want to pay for it. So presumably, since there is this pool of funding available, I'm gathering from the electoral area director that there's a change of heart in the community, but we have not yet heard from the electoral area director as to why there's that change of heart at this point in time. But I don't know if Tarek, did you want to speak to that project at all?
Yes, through Mr. Chair. This project also is relying on a aquifer study that we are conducting, and that study will, the collection of data will be completed in 2025, and then province will have their say on it. So before that study is completed, and that is a requirement or request by the community to figure it out what's happening in the aquifer for that region. And based on that, we will have to take a decision whether this project goes ahead or not. So $700,000 right now is an estimate. I think it's a kind of high estimate, but even if we want to go forward with this project, we will have to have that aquifer study completed first. So that's gonna take some time to do that.
Okay, I've got Director Wardenberg.
I would support an amendment from Director Siemens.
There's not an amendment just yet, Director Wardenberg, but
okay, well, I would agree with what Director Siemens has to say. I would support the funding for the Cultus Lake sewer plant, and I would defer everything else to further reports from staff. Thank you.
Okay. Director, I saw Director Dickey pop up on my screen, and then I think Director Horn, you had indicated as well. Director Dickey, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. The Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of a week ago resulted in a vigorous discussion amongst the electoral area directors on the ultimate destination of this funding, and certainly amongst some of the electoral area directors, the sense is that the municipalities were granted generous funding through the same program, and that much of this $8.8 million final destination should be within the electoral area communities. So look forward to continued discussion in the coming months as to where this funding will end up. But I think that is the position that the Electoral Area Services Committee took on this.
Thank you, Director Dickey. Director Horn.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the motion that's on the table as it stands, and I think that the staff description of why can be summarized as these are the highest of the high. And in RACS, I made the comment that while it's very good news that we've received these funds, both at the regional district and, as Director Dickey said, it's at our municipalities, it's not unlike somebody throwing a steak into a pen full of starving dogs. And I think the risk of it becomes that we could be at each other's throats instead of working as we so usually do. I look at it this way. I think that first of all, when it comes to the North Cultus Lake wastewater treatment, the funds almost are all there, and this is the last little bit to get over an incredibly high mountain that it's rather remarkable we finally seem to be at the crest of. And the environmental impacts of this are not just going to serve people who live in the area, but all of us who are in the watershed and who enjoy Cultus Lake. Similarly, I think the project in Hope serves a larger area and has a larger price tag. I'm mindful of the fact that this leaves $6.8 million left for East to come back and work on. A lot of the other projects in my mind have relatively smaller price tags and may have other sources of funding. And I think that's the important thing here. And I think there's some of them are more nascent, more early in their process as well. So from the perspective of this director, I've said this a few times. I don't look at this as just as $8.8 million. I look at this as a very substantial bolus of money, and there gives us power that we wouldn't normally have to address and put to bed some projects. And I think those are really critical things to do, especially when not doing so can put the rest of the project at risk. So I'll be supporting the motion as it's been currently moved.
Thank you. Other directors, and then sorry. Oh, Director Smith, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is very important, of course, for Hope and Area B things. So we would like everybody to support us on this thing because the cost went up so fast on us. It was unimaginable how much it went up. So if we don't deal it now, we probably won't ever get it, at least in our term anyway. So, and I do support everybody that helps us get it thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Other directors for first time, and then I'll check in, see if there's additional comments. No? Director Siemens?
Yes, I think I'll just leave it as is, and I will support the motion. I was just concerned that on the Hope one, if there was other ways for them to get the money, that we were setting a precedent. But having heard that, I know that there's an environmental component to it, and I have to put my regional hat on. My question wasn't simply because I want the money divvied up according to population. That wasn't my intention. I guess my questions were more along the next rendition of how we work on the next 6.3. I had some concerns that we were maybe setting a precedent that would cause some indigestion. But having heard the arguments and read the report again and heard all the impact, I don't think if I made a motion it would have any support other than maybe one or two people. So I will support as is.
Thank you, Director Siemens, and thank you, board directors, for the good discussion. I'll add my 2 cents at the end of the conversation to say that this hasn't been an easy discussion, but I want to thank the board for the way in which and the professionalism in which each and every one of the directors has approached this. They've looked at this through the lens of not only their own communities and their own needs, but also the needs of the region, a risk-based. I want to thank staff for looking at this and trying to synthesize all the information, the wants and needs coming through the board, and for the work that's yet to come, because you also have to fit this into the box of the parameters by which we've received this money. So there may be some wants and needs that don't necessarily fit the criteria by which we were given this grant money. And so there is going to continue to be some work to go, but I just want to continue to encourage, I guess, the type of respectful conversation that this board is engaged in right now around this situation, because I know that's not necessarily the case with our colleagues around the province and other areas, or maybe a little bit more akin to what Director Horn described as tearing each other apart over some steak. So I do want to thank directors for the way that they're engaging in this conversation, how they're engaging with each other, and how they're going to engage with staff. Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed, if any? The item carries. Next item.
6.2 is the 2023 grant and aid request for the DeRoche Farmers Market in Electoral Area C.
Thank you. It's moved by Director Wardenberg, seconded by Director Castle. Discussion? Good. All in favor? Opposed, if any? The item carries. Next item.
7.1 is the Fraser Valley Regional District Cultus Lake Park Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1672 to update parking regulations for First Avenue lots and building height regulations for Lakeshore Drive and Monroe Avenue.
Thank you. This is EA. So a mover and second. It's moved by Director Dixon, seconded by Director Castle. Discussion, Director Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanting to thank the Planning Department for bringing this forward and taking the time with listening to what the residents have been saying and continue to say. They've done a lot of work with it and have made some changes, and so it'll be interesting to see what the public say at the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments by board directors? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? The item carries. Next item.
7.2 is the Fraser Valley Regional District Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1539 to facilitate a 2-lot subdivision at 11882 Sylvester Road.
Thank you. Need a mover and a seconder on this one. It's moved by Director Johnson, seconded by Director Castle. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? The item carries. Next item.
7.3 is the Fraser Valley Regional District Popcom Sewer Service Area Amendment Bylaw number 1698.
Thank you. It's moved by Director Dickey, seconded by Director McAhonick. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Item carries. Next item.
7.4 is the Fraser Valley Regional District Floodplain Management Bylaw number 1669.
Thank you. That's moved by Director Horn, seconded by Director Clute. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Item carries. Motion number 2 is moved by Director Mercer, seconded by Director Popov. Discussion? None, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Item carries. Motion number 3 is third reading. Is moved by Director McAhonick, seconded by Director Lowen. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Item carries, and adoption is moved by Director Dickey, seconded by Director Ross. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? The item carries. Next item.
7.5 is the Fraser Valley Regional District Development Application Fees Establishment Bylaw number 1696.
Thank you. Motion number 1 is moved by Director Shahal, seconded by Director Castle. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Item carries. Second and third reading is moved by Director Mercer, seconded by Director Smith. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Item carries. And adoption is moved by Director Wardenberg, seconded by Director Barkman. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? The item carries. Next item.
7.6 is the Fraser Valley Regional District 2022 to 2026 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw number 1699.
Okay, first reading is moved by Director Pranger, seconded by Director Siemens. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Item is carried. Second and third reading moved by Director Gill, seconded by Director Barkman. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Item carries. Adoption is moved by Director Dickey, seconded by Director Ross. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? The item carries. Next item.
7.7 is the Fraser Valley Regional District Security Issuing Bylaw number 1700.
Let's do it again. It's moved by Director Shaw, seconded by Director Dickey. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Item carries. Second and third reading is moved by Director Horn, seconded by Director Johnson. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Item carries. And adoption is moved by Director Clute, seconded by Director Dixon. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Item carries. Next item.
8.1 is the North Cultus Lake.
Sold to Director Johnson.
We're gonna go like that, are we?
We're going like that.
8.1 is the North Cultus Lake Wastewater Treatment Plant Integrated Project Delivery Validation Report and Contract Approval.
Thank you. I'm the venture. Yes, that's moved by Director
moved.
Dixon and seconded by Director Popo. Discussion, Director Dixon.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to the board for their support earlier in the meeting to get this project underway and happening. And so appreciate that and thank you from the community as well. I have, believe it or not, I actually read this entire document and understood some of it. And but I appreciate the information that's in there, as well as it's obvious, like it's a different process where people are working together and trying to make this best value for the community, as well as, keeping the workers safe. I picked up on that several different times, and as well as the kind of like changing the environment of people working together so that everybody there is trying to make the best, or this is my understanding anyway, trying to make the best project and create just a darn fine Cultus Lake wastewater sewer plant. So I'm looking forward to seeing that to go forward, and just really appreciate what's happened so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Dixon. And I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize all of your advocacy efforts on this item. It certainly got us a heck of a long way towards seeing this come to fruition. So appreciate that. Other comments? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed, if any? The item passes unanimously. Next item.
8.2 is the Harrison.
Yeah.
Excited about wastewater.
I see a couple of engineers whose faces aren't white anymore. Yeah, that's good.
All right. 8.2 is the Harrison Mills Transfer Station Crown Land tenure renewal.
Thank you. It's moved by Director Wardenberg, seconded by Director Lowen. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor. Opposed, if any, the item carries. Next item.
8.3 is pro forma covenants for the FVRD floodplain management bylaw number 1669.
Thank you. That's moved by Director Castle, seconded by Director Johnson. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor. Opposed, if any, the item carries. Next item.
9.1 is Agricultural Land Commission application for a non-farm use in the Agricultural Land Reserve at 59710 Lougheed Highway in Electoral Area B.
Thank you. That's moved by, am I seeing alternate Director Dean? Are you on that one? And seconded by Director Dickey. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, opposed, if any, the item carries. Next item.
9.2 is the Agricultural Land Commission application for a non-farm use at 810 Iverson Road in Electoral Area H.
Thank you. That's moved by Director Dixon and seconded by Director Wardenberg. Discussion. Director Dixon.
Again, thank you. Just really wanting to stress that the community was out in numbers last week at EASC as well as online, and really have made it very clear that this is not something that is wanted in our community. The biggest concern, it really is the uncertainty that we can guarantee that our aquifer and our water source will not be damaged from the volume and the amount of material that's sitting on top of it. It is unfortunate that this refusal will create some challenges for the landowner as well as for the company. And my hope is that it will be removed quickly. That's up to ALC, the next step around that, but also that understanding that provincially we need a place for this kind of material, and I think that maybe is a little more work that perhaps we can continue at UBCM and things like in those places to lobby for that, because obviously we're all trying to put our organics in the right spot, and we need some places to put what isn't quite the organic aspect. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Dixon. Director Ross.
Thank you. Well, it seems Director Dixon is our superstar board member tonight. I just wanted to recognize and thank you for your advocacy in getting this to where it is today. You've done a remarkable job representing your community, but kudos as well to your community members themselves, because, you know, that one public meeting that you had that I attended, I was just blown away by the level of expertise in that community and their advocacy efforts to, you know, speak to other levels of government and push for better changes and to get this thing shut down. So a lot of thanks to them and thanks to you.
Thank you, Director Horn.
Yeah, it's unusual for a non-electoral area representative to speak on a matter that doesn't involve us, but I wanted to build on Director Ross's comments. Today, myself and a number of others from local communities were out in the area of Hatzick Prairie and saw similar activity and a significant concern out there. So not only do I support all of my electoral area colleagues here tonight in supporting this, even though I don't have a vote, I anticipate that it's the tip of the iceberg. And in mentioning today to Minister Ma and to Minister Alexis, the enforcement needs we have around this issue, or the gap in enforcement needs, is substantial. We also illustrated some of the differences and challenges when an environmental concern is happening and it's on agricultural lands, and some of the communication challenges that can happen between those two ministries. So I thank you for your advocacy on this one, Director Dixon, but I think we are all going to be poised to learn from it, because I think we have more advocacy to do.
Thank you. Other directors? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? The item carries. Next item.
9.3 is the Fraser Valley Express critical fix to address capacity issues between Abbotsford and Burnaby.
Thank you. That's moved by Director Pranger, seconded by Director Kloot. Discussion? Director Horn, go ahead.
I'll just repeat a comment I made at RACS, which I think is it's significant that BC Transit is using surplus funds or here to invest in this piece of transit infrastructure. And I think it really represents an awareness that we have a need for these types of resources, but particularly for the type of innovation this represents. And I think you'll see more of that out of BC Transit. So kudos and thanks to them. And this is a step in the right direction.
Thank you. Director Pranger.
I'm happy to support this this motion and hope that as well that other innovative projects can happen. Thinking of one on the North Shore in particular, and I'm happy to support this and look forward to other innovative ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Pranger. Other comments? Just add my 2 cents on this one. I know that the challenges that BC Transit, our partner in transit, is facing, having only their core operating dollars approved and no other increases to fund some of the great many asks that have come from across the province, including our own region. But I also think, as Director Horn said, this represents a vote of confidence in the regional transit system that we've been able to put together with the partners sitting at this table and run by the very professional staff that we have at the regional district, in partnership with all of our local government and municipal partners who contribute into this service. And if anything, we've really set the bar in terms of what we can do with regional transit as other communities and other regions struggle to try and crack this nut and figure out how to deliver kind of regional transit that our residents deserve and are asking for. I think this is, like I said, an important vote of confidence by BC Transit to allow us to move forward on this. And I would say, building on this, to Director Pranger's point, we've long anticipated a north of the Fraser system that parallels our FEX and connects folks in communities along the north of the Fraser into other communities and connects other communities into the north of the Fraser as well. Director Horn.
I'm sorry for the second time, Mr. Chair, but just your remarks made me realize that I won't ask to amend the motion, but just as a subset of the motion, that we make a special point of reaching back to BC Transit and correspondence that says thank you for this, but also identifies the advocacy and work we're getting out of Mr. Ringmack in this region.
Yeah, he had hinted at the Lower Mainland LGA about this coming, and that they have identified some possible fixes, and that they were taking steps to do so. And I definitely, in an informal manner, express my appreciation on behalf of the board. But certainly, Ms. Kinnaman, in our conversations, I'm sure we can ensure that Mr. Ringma's properly thanked. Thank you. Are we ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? If any, the item carries. Next item.
9.4 is a Rogers Telecommunications Facility at 14850 Alpine Boulevard in Sunshine Valley, Electoral Area B.
Thank you. Mover and a seconder on this one. It's for all. It's moved by Director Smith, seconded by Director Dixon. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed? If any, the item carries. Next item.
9.5 is the FVRD Code of Responsible Conduct. There is a motion for your consideration.
Thank you. It's moved by Director Horn, seconded by Director Shahal. Discussion? Director Horn.
Pleased to say that on Monday evening, the City of Mission also revised our code of conduct and did so in an interest to make it simpler, to have a very clear identification of both the formal and informal complaint process, and to really delineate the policy from what are mostly sort of philosophical and abstract statements into things that are more clear behavioral do's and don'ts. And I know we struggled, and much of what we had is very similar to what exists here. And so I just wanted to offer that the resources that we assembled can be shared here if they're helpful along the way.
Thank you, Director Horn. Director McIlhenny.
Yeah, I was really happy to see this, and I know things are changing when we talk about inclusion, and a lot of the things have that when we're looking at this are about language and proper use of language. And there is, I think sometimes, and Chair Lum and I discussed some of this around just language and becoming educated. So I would hope that we may be able to find a piece of funding or find an organization that provides us training at no or low cost on some of the language, because things are changing very quickly. And I think generational divides, things that were acceptable are just not acceptable anymore. So I would really hope we could include that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McIlhenny. And I think it's a really good point about how I think there has been some discussion, not just here, but across the province on codes of conduct. Of course, our responsibility to review this code of conduct comes out of the province. And there was a lot of work with the province around code of conduct and acceptable behavior. And that discussion has gone on for quite some time. It stopped short of actually requiring us to have an ethics commissioner. They haven't provided a provincial ethics commissioner, which was something that numerous local governments across the province had asked for. And instead, they kind of put the onus back on the boards. But I think you touched on a really key principle around people mostly looked at ethics commissioners as punitive and there to be there when there's egregious breaches of code of conduct, rather than to be there as an educational resource. And I think that's a very good point that you brought up around what can this board do to look at educational resources for ourselves at the board. So we stop. So rather than get ourselves into a position where we're having to use our codes of conduct as a hammer for punitive measures when people have kind of stepped out of the line, we're using it as preventative and educational. So it's a good point, and I appreciate that point.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Other comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? The item carries. Next item.
9.6 is implementing the clean economy study, industrial employment lands. There is a motion for your consideration.
Thank you. It's moved by Director Ross and seconded by Director Gill. Discussion. Director Flute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question. I'm fully in support of this motion for our consideration, but I am curious where, and I believe it was at RACS last week. It says I'm looking for some language that maybe what the conversation entailed, that the Minister of Agriculture will identify and approaches Minister of Agriculture and Food identify approaches that incorporate a rural cooperative approach with municipal interface on lands that have a specific and focused economic use. Was there a conversation piece around that? I'm just kind of curious on the background on that part of the motion.
Miss Kinnaman, and maybe this opens up an opportunity because this was some of the discussion that happened around the mayor's committee. So
that's what I was getting, right.
In case I put Miss Kinnaman on the spot here.
I simply was going to answer that this was not a staff motion, and so it might be beneficial for the rest of the board to hear from those members of the chair and mayor's committee.
And my, if I will, my question more was in line of if we're pursuing something that benefits the region, how do we identify opportunities within the region without having the province come in and make decisions like they did with the Housing First strategy? Like my thought process is we need local input when we deal with these employment land opportunities.
Thank you, Director Clute. So I'm just going to check in with Director Castle because he was next on my speakers list. Do you want to hear from Director Horn, and then we'll go back to you? Director Horn, over to you.
Thank you. Well, I think the last line of the motion, Director Clute, kind of answers your question to some extent. The idea was that we would assemble as a group to identify, or actually maybe a better word is create an identity for how we believe this might actualize here in our region. And I think it was a comment, and correct me if I'm wrong, Director Pranger, that sort of started with Director Pranger, but I think we could all agree with that. This region is unique in the sense that it is there are so many instances of the rural and urban interface, and that creates both challenges and opportunities for the movement of goods from, or the movement of raw materials from agricultural settings into processing plants and then into distribution. And we felt that would deserve to be explored as something we were perhaps uniquely qualified to do. And that also we believe that, again, an array of both challenges and opportunities exist when it comes to waste management in our region. And that perhaps we can be both advancers of clean economy in terms of understanding or knowledge in that area, but also in executing a cleaner approach to managing waste in our region. And perhaps there's capacity there that can be of value to other customers because we know we're in a somewhat vulnerable position in terms of the long-term sort of integrity of our waste management stream. So the idea really is for us as a group to collaborate on what we believe we can be, and not just out of intuition or desire or romance, but out of the exhaustive studies that are illustrated here. And then in so doing, use that to advocate to the Ministry of Agriculture as well as to other parts of the provincial and federal government.
So that answers my question. It's the local aspect from this group who are able to work towards potential solutions for our area. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Castle.
Thank you, Chair Lum. And I'm just looking to check in on this one, not so much on the issue itself, but where it came from. I noticed that this came to this table from the Mayor's Task Force. And after reading through the minutes of the Mayor's and Chair's Task Force meeting, I'm curious to know if this is in keeping with the scope and the terms of the task force, and how staff work plans have been impacted by some of the extensive work, it appears, that is being done to support the Mayor's table. I'd like to, if I could, hear from staff regarding the impacts of the task force to staff work plans, and from the chair, can we get an update with regards to the scope and terms of reference, as it seems as though, and maybe I misunderstood, but the scope of the task force seems to have widened from what was originally intended.
Okay, so a few questions. Let's start with work plan. Let's start with staff. Looking at what we have before us, what is work that we had underway, what is constituting new work, what are the potential implications if I have Director Castle, right? What are those potential implications in terms of the ongoing work underway at the regional district?
Sure, through the chair to Director Castle. So speaking specifically to the clean economy study, the FERD actually was the originators of the clean economy study. And so at this juncture, I wouldn't say that there was a tremendous amount of work added to the work plan required for the first meeting of the chair and mayor's task force. You know, what's before us here, I think that writing a letter to the Ministry of Agriculture asking for a meeting is probably not too onerous of a task. However, I think that the point is well made, that the final clause about collaborating with member municipalities and identifying areas of interest, you know, this will have to be something that we keep a close eye on. When the genesis of this committee came forward, it was made clear that it wouldn't necessarily be the FVRD staff that would take on all of the work. We don't yet know what that work is and how we would divide it up. It's not particularly unusual for particularly for regional staff to meet with other member municipal staff on a variety of topics. So that's yet to be told, I think, for this particular topic. In terms of broadening the scope, I think that you're correct. We agreed, I think, in the terms of reference that there were going to be 3 areas of focus. There are a couple of new things that have been added to the agenda. One appears to just be a motion at this stage, which is actually a topic of conversation that the full board had previously discussed. And then there was another item about sending a letter. So again, sending a letter doesn't particularly have a dire impact on my work plan because that's the person that writes the letters. But I thank you for raising the point. We will certainly be keeping an eye on it to make sure that we're not veering off of the agreed upon work plan for 2023.
Thank you. And Director Horn, or I'm going to actually go to Director Siemens, who's on the panel, and then I'll circle back to you, Director Horn. It's okay.
Thank you. I think some of what we were talking about it's a way for the mayors to talk about challenges they're having in their municipalities and making sure that we're all on the same page. We know that transportation is a big challenge for all of us. So my vision wasn't for this to be additional work for our staff, but it would be to have a discussion about things that we are doing. So transportation is a huge challenge, truck parking, getting our product to market, whether it's aggregates or whether it's agriculture products, everything coming out of the Port of Vancouver. So we wanted to have a regional perspective. So it helped us to advocate for more, using the regional growth strategy, the tremendous amount of work that's gone into that. We don't want that just to be ticking off a box that the province requires, but making sure that the comprehensive nature of that work isn't lost on. And so, our CEOs do get together, and I believe with Ms. Kinnaman. So there's some things that can bubble out of there. So it was not necessarily to create more work, but it was to create more advocacy, to make sure that we're on the same page. If something's working, like we're going to be doing a regional, we did a regional, I should say a citywide, very comprehensive land use. And out of that came the motion that everybody supported at the Lower Mainland Local Government Association to do with the ag industrial lands. So that's the type of thing that I sort of myself envision, with the homeless challenges, making sure that we're speaking with a coordinated voice. And we felt that that also had some merit because there are things that are happening in rural areas of the regional district that are not unlike some of the rural homeless camps that we have in Abbotsford. So we have the urban challenges, but we also have the rural challenges in Abbotsford. So this was a way for us to have that type of comprehensive discussion and then make sure that we're all rowing in the same direction. And then how do we do it effectively? So I hope that explains a bit. That's kind of my vision, but I could be completely out and I'll leave it to others.
Nope. Okay, I go to Director Horn and then I'm going to circle back to you, Director Castle, for
Director Siemens. I think said much of what I was going to say, which is that it is within the mandate, I think, of the committee to do work that has to do with transportation distribution, and this is a vital part of that. I appreciated what CAO Kinnaman had to say, that this was work that was already done, and I think it comes down to the fact that if this work is going to move forward, it will need the capacity that lives within the municipalities. The reality is it's not entirely doable within the Fraser Valley Regional District. And so if there wasn't a will within municipalities to advance it in a regional perspective, it probably wouldn't be worthwhile to bring here. And Director Siemens, I should say, I guess I have to pay 2 fines. I got your name wrong twice in the same comment. Director Siemens is right, and I think was very much at the core of our very first discussions about doing this, is taking a regional approach that will benefit us all economically. And I guess I would remind the board that the committee itself has no power to do something on its own. It's really about saying, is this worthwhile bringing to the larger board? And if so, in what way? How would we shape the motion? So, for example, the idea of identifying our unique rural-urban agricultural interface was added at that table as a result of those discussions. So this board is still ultimately going to see and talk about anything that comes there. But I think the idea is simply to see, and as Director Siemens said, CAOs as well are commenting on whether or not they think they have the capacity. And that's almost even a prerequisite step to it coming to us, because if they don't, I don't think it finds its way to our agenda either. And the idea really is this something we can genuinely believe that will activate, that it has the value? And so I think of it almost like a safeguarding system as it's getting here. If there really wasn't municipal buy-in, we'd be spinning our tires here.
Thank you. And back to you, Director Castle.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate the explanation. While I'm not at all questioning the value of the work, in keeping with kind of the spirit of our strategic planning, where the concept of scarcity was very much front and center, and we hear a lot about work plans. I just want, at reading through the minutes of your meeting was work, and those were there were reports from staff, and to me, when I was looking at it and reading it, it looked like a lot of work, and so I'm just checking in to ensure that we're good.
Thank you, Director Castle. Any other discussion, comments? No. I have one question through to staff, and that's on the second to last clause around staff implement the policy 7.4 out of the choices for the future and develop a regional employment land inventory. I know that this was anticipated in the falling out of the work of the Clean Economy study. I just want to verify that this was work that we had, or a policy that we had anticipated undertaking, and verify that while this calls on staff or directs staff to implement it, that we have the leeway that this wouldn't necessarily bump something off a work plan, understanding that they're all well underway halfway into the year.
Chair Lum, thank you for pointing that out. I'm grateful that that clause does not have a timeline attached to it. And so I think that this board could expect that there will be a report coming forward at some point in the future. Similar to the discussion that's been happening here, we're encouraged that there's a regional thought process, a regional approach, greater collaboration, so that we can all move forward on projects that are similar. So I wouldn't say that anything's bumped off the work plan just yet, but there isn't a timeline attached to that just today. So I'm hoping that you're not expecting a report next month.
No, and I guess more what I wanted to get out of that was an understanding that if there was an anticipated change in what we had expected, or what staff had expected to undertake this year, that the board would have an opportunity to have further comment on that. Fair enough? Okay, good. Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? If any, the item carries. Exciting.
9.7 is the survey of persons experiencing homelessness. And I would just point out to the board that perhaps the heading there isn't entirely reflective of the motion. The topic at the chair and mayor's committee, of course, is housing and homelessness. And so perhaps there's a little bit of a disconnect there, but there is a motion for your consideration.
Thank you. We see a mover and a second, moved by Director Kloot, seconded by Director Johnson. Discussion. Director Horn, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to just remind all that the motion itself was meant at this point to also ask for input. I think that there are other major concepts that we should be including that we've overlooked when forming the motion. And I think the intention was to facilitate amendments. I was going to almost say friendly amendments, but I knew that that would not go very well with Ms. Van Ness. So I think there's an openness if there's something that's missed here.
Director Mercer.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just through to staff to Ms. Kinnaman, and just reading it, I just want to be crystal clear, and I think I know the answer, just double checking. When we make comments that outlining our concerns, and then we go down to point number 2, consideration for review of the BC code to allow for tiny homes and shipping containers. Is that explicit in that we're not necessarily in favor of that, and that certainly needs more discussion?
Through the chair to Director Mercer, once again, I would recommend that you inquire from the chair and mayor's members. This was not a motion that was put forward by staff.
I can take a stab at it. And then I'll let Director Horn correct me. I think from my recollection of the conversation, it wasn't necessarily meant to be prescriptive. It was meant to address the issue because it's a question that's being come up quite a lot. Why don't you just do this? Or why don't you just, and I know you've heard it as well, in our respective communities, why can't you just do tiny homes? Why can't you just do this? So I think it was seeking some clarity in the BC building code around that going forward. So that was my understanding of it.
But is the intent of the letter to stress that we're not in favor of it, or is it to stress that we want more? Like, I don't understand what this means.
I'll happily answer that if you'd like to.
Go ahead, Director.
The key word is consideration. I think that when attending the summit, as well as looking at the policy, there has really been nothing attended to in terms of looking at modernizing the BCBC when it comes to how it slows down housing. So for example, tiny homes right now are simply not allowed. They're treated as RVs. So, or in other circumstances, there's been no consideration of how a person might prove out that they can build a home reliably and safely out of a shipping container. So it's not meant to be prescriptive. It's meant to ask that as they look at their BC building homes for people plan, that they look also at the building code as part of that.
With the view that there should be consultation before this becomes implemented. Like, I know, for example, Chilliwack, from the discussion we've had so far, not interested in homes in containers, whereas other communities might. So there certainly might be a divergence of opinions even on that question if I pick one out of them. That's my only point.
Thank you, Director. Other comments, questions? Yes, go ahead, Director Conroy.
Hi, thanks. I agree that, yeah, we need more low income homes. My concern, I actually have 2 questions. ALR restrictions, like how would that, what comes first? You know, with ALR, you can't have secondary homes or sometimes cargo containers, things like that. What would come first with the restrictions? And number 2, with placement and I guess adding, I know Mission being our closest city, there's 4, I think, low-income housing projects approved on the BC site, says. And I'm just concerned about infrastructure and schools and even the water. Are there considerations coming in before these are being decided, being built? And if everyone gets put a secondary suite and stuff, parking, water, any of those kind of things. Sorry.
No, I think Director Conrad, you hit the nail on the head, right? That there was a lot of things said at the housing summit, in particular, by the premier and by staff. Some was consistent with things we had heard before. Some caught us a little bit off guard. Ultimately, a lot of questions remain and yet to be answered. That legislation, of course, isn't set to be considered until the fall session. So I think the intent of this kind of discussion was to try and get out ahead, not necessarily to provide solutions, but just more asking the questions, ensuring that we're on record, laying out some of those very similar concerns that you've just laid out, and some more about, you know, the legislation and the changes that are being telegraphed by the province. So I think it was trying to get on the record here and state, you know, well, all of this sounds interesting in terms of how you plan to address housing shortages and affordable housing, et cetera, additional supply. How are you going to address the number of things on here? And I'd venture a guess quite a few more. So yeah, it's not this board advocating for these as a solution necessarily, but moreover putting them forward as these are very real concerns and considerations. And I'd venture there may be more as we move towards this, and this moves more to a legislative reality. Director Pranger?
Sorry. I think it's when you make the housing announcement, have you thought of all of these bullets that are listed in the motion? Have you thought about the impact on rural communities? Have you thought about rural communities not being able to have the capacity? Have you thought about schools? Have you thought about all of these things? And I think that's what's being addressed in this motion.
Director Wardenberg?
Yeah, just on Director Horn's, maybe an inclusion to this would be how it affects not so much Area C, but the municipality's DCC bylaws, the community amendment contributions, the parks contributions as they're adding density. Would they, could you have a discussion or include, you know, as they densify or proposing to densify the single family homes, will they give you extra abilities, legal abilities to charge more for those increased, well, obviously increased expenses that you're going to incur? So I think that's a question to ask.
Yep. More good points for sure. I know Director Siemens, you had your light on, and check in with you for first time. I'll circle back to you, Director Horn, for a final word.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the goal is basically the frustration that we have at the city of Abbotsford, and I think we share that with Mission and Chilliwack as the larger centers, is we were not the problem children in the challenges that this housing form and some of the heavy-handed perspectives that they are proposing. My hope is that was just a trial balloon and it's going to get shot down, because those of us that have been working diligently with official community plans that densify from the core out, I think have been doing things very well and have not been the challenge. So we're hoping that message comes through. This is what the intent of this letter was, to basically articulate how well things have been going, and to really sort of push back. So it's sort of our first attempt at pushing back. And yeah, so I'll leave it at that. But I guess the one thing is we always thought Abbotsford was dense enough, but no.
And Director, I'll just check in the first time. Anyone else for first? We'll circle back. Director Horn for the last word.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say two things, I guess. The first is that at the time when this motion was formed, we knew that we would be hearing feedback this evening and giving considerable discretion to the chair as he wrote the letter. And I'm sure he's heard those comments with that in mind. And I think everybody that tried to make this motion was comfortable with the idea that it would be distilled into something more simple, which I would describe as a better, more consultative process, and one that looks at the needs of communities of different sizes and capacities. And the second is a more fulsome toolkit. Director Wardenberg's comments about DCCs and CACs that were spoken about in the plan and at the summit in terms of the process review, but there are other areas that were a bit of blind spots. And so this motion tried to identify some of those blind spots, but your comments are well received. And I think that we know they're doing that work. Whether they're doing that work in a bidirectional communicative manner is important. And to wrap this comment up, I would say that a letter is just one of the gestures we'll need to have. I spoke today with Mission Abbotsford MLA. I know it's supposed to be the other way around, but I'm never going to do it that way. Pam Alexis, and said to her, you know, when you're speaking with Minister Kalon, can you please make it clear that we want to make sure that this is a bidirectional process? We may have all been in receipt yesterday of a letter from the District of Coldstream that was very similar along those lines. And I think that the more we're sending similar messages, the more that we're likely to see a collaborative, but still fast moving process.
Thank you, Director Horn. And then lastly, I would just add, and I don't know, I'm thinking carefully about whether or not I muddy the waters here, but Ms. Kenneman, I want to check in our letter, the Growing Communities Fund, they explicitly reference and tie some of that funding to building the infrastructure to enable more homes. So it's a consideration that I think this board should be mindful of if that is in fact true.
Chair Lom, actually, I'm just quickly flipping to page 42 of the agenda, and I believe that Ms. Lonsborough directly quoted the grant letter that was received. And it says, the principal objective of the GCF is to increase the local housing supply with investments in community infrastructure and amenities.
So we have an indication of what the province's answer back to us is going to be on some of these things. So we know, but Director Barkman, comment?
I was just going to say, in my previous life where I saw how people we'd go from a single suite to 2 suites to multiple. In the rural, you get additions on. I think the longer this festers, the community is just going to do their own thing. And then whatever happens on ALC land and try to get some of that back compliant, I think we're going to have big problems. So the longer this takes, people will, the other day, my neighbor had just walking his dog, and a lot of the back patios are all being filled in. Some have building permits, some don't. And I think we've got to be careful that we don't let that slip too far, because people's safety could be at jeopardy.
Helping the province recognize some of the unintended consequences of this. Yeah. Okay, ready for the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? The item carries. Good discussion. Next item.
9.8 is Ecom 911, British Columbia's Lifeline.
Thank you. It's moved by, I see Director Mercer's hand on this one. Director Mercer, seconded by Director Smith. Discussion. Some of you participated in the session from Ecom at the Lower Mainland LGA and heard about some of the advocacy underway by Ecom and NG911. So again, this topic is going to remain, I think, top of mind for local governments for sure. So call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Item carries. Next item.
9.9 is the Emergency Management Program Policy.
Thank you. It's moved by Director Johnson, second by Director Dixon. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Item carries. Next item.
Section 10 is items for information and correspondence, 10.1 through 10.4. Happy to separate any of those items.
Thank you, directors. Any items, Director Conrad?
I just had a quick question about the greenhouse gas. So 10.1.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just sorry, because I am new and I'm just trying to get my head around things. Sorry. I noticed that like almost each municipality in different places come up with the number differently? I know that you're looking looking at it next year. Like, sorry, I'm gonna phrase this. When you're looking at how you're going to decide how you're going to monitor, are you going to go more provincial, or are you going to look at how the municipalities are doing it? How are you going to tie it all together? Does that make sense?
Ms. Kinnaman?
Sure. Why don't we ask our Manager of Regional Strategic Planning, Allison Stewart, to speak to this item.
Stewart.
Through the chair, I will try to boil down a really complex subject area. The original targets were developed with fairly significant modeling at the local level to determine just how much GHG reduction we could get using the policies of the day. And we were able to come up with, through this modeling and through working with our member municipalities, we sort of came up with this 50% target. There's been very significant changes at the provincial level in terms of regulation, and the Clean BC, I think it's Road to 2030, has introduced some very significant new opportunities for GHG reduction through policies such as electrification of transit fleets, electrification of the personal vehicles, electrification of the commercial fleet. So when you start bringing that kind of thing into our realm, with local government plus the province plus the federal government, we would be able to get our greenhouse gases reduced significantly more. So in order to come up with our new targets, it'll be, working with the province, it'll be working with our member municipalities and finding a way to get to carbon neutrality by 2050. How are we going to get there? Where are we at now with the policies that we have in the draft regional growth strategy? And this does require a collaborative process. We had a collaborative process at the beginning, and this next version would have a collaborative process as well. So there's a lot of interest in working together on this. So I'm not sure if that answers the question.
It kind of does. So you're hoping to look at everyone's and then come up with your own way of targeting, or you say you're looking at the provinces and the municipalities?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it'll be well collaboratively coming up with a process at the regional level that works for everyone. One of the challenges with actually monitoring is that the province promised to provide that data a number of years ago, but in the last number of years, just there's been no transportation related data, which makes it difficult for us to actually monitor.
But other municipalities have been able to set targets without that data.
They've been using their whatever modeling they're using. Some use the provincial targets, others have developed their own targets. Each community were allowed to come up with their unique approach, because every community is different. What the City of Vancouver can do is different than what the District of Hope could do. So there's no specific target within the legislation. It really is about each community finding their best way of reaching these targets. And everyone's going to be different because no community is the same.
Thank you. And I know Director Davidson, it sounds like you and him have had a discussion on this, because this was a question that he brought up, talking about, I think, from the municipal side. There was also challenges back in 21 around the elimination of the CARE-UP program, with communities that had signed on to the climate action initiatives and were modeling their own, reporting on their own emissions, but it was kind of a self-identified reporting. So that's why there seems to be an inconsistency across the board, and the province was reticent to step in and say, this is the standard by which everyone's going to report by. It was just file the report and we'll take it as is, because you were signed on with the Climate Action Charter. We'll kind of take these, we'll consolidate them, and this kind of forms the basis of how we're reporting out some of our GHGs. So I get the point that Director Davidson and that you are talking about, I think, with finding some consistency, and then how do we measure our performance against against these targets. But then I hear some of the challenges being raised by staff, in which, again, this is a place where the province sort of stopped short, and they didn't help us create a provincial standard so you can easily measure performance community to community, region to region, where the data is normalized and makes sense, right? So it's going to be flawed, out of whack, by no fault of the region, by no fault of the municipalities, just because we're not required to abide by a standard, the same standard, okay? Yeah. Other questions? Okay, seeing none, next item.
Moving down to reports by board directors.
Thank you. Board directors, opportunity, Director Clute.
Thank you. I just wanted to offer my congratulations to Director Ross for running a fantastic Lower Mainland LGA a couple weeks ago. Was a great conference. Saw many familiar faces from this table there. Hope everybody enjoyed the time there and the opportunity to mingle and get to meet some new colleagues around the table. I know it was very well run, and I applaud Director Ross, and I give my congratulations to Director Pranger for also being elected to the board. We have very good representation from the Fraser Valley Regional District.
Yeah.
So,
I heard she had a good campaign manager.
But yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for everybody for being involved, and it was great to be back together in person, and looking forward to seeing some of these resolutions that were supported on the UBCM agenda in September.
Thank you, Director Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually have a question about what if I wanted to go back all the way back to 7.1 and clarify something? Am I allowed to still do that?
That is a resolution.
Cultus Lake zoning bylaw.
No, that is a resolution
Motion has
being
passed,
passed.
Mr. Chair, so
Yeah.
I'm not really sure what the hope is at the table.
So I wasn't going to change the motion. I just wanted to be sure that the 30-day period where they would be reviewing
right.
permit applications, what is included in that, or was I supposed to do something differently?
Sure. Mr. Chair, perhaps we could have our Director of Planning and Development provide some guidance. I think that a motion at this juncture, a separate motion at this juncture would be in order, but perhaps Graham could speak to that item with respect to building permits in process.
Sure. Mr. Tamlus.
Thank you, through the chair. We heard a strong concern within the community that building permit applications may come forward before these new height rules come into effect through the zoning amendment. We have an opportunity under the Local Government Act where zoning changes in preparation to withhold building permit applications for a period of 30 days. With a resolution from the board. And so if we receive new building permit applications in this period before the zoning bylaw is adopted, our intention is to bring those to the board for a decision as to whether you'd wish to withhold that application for 30 days. And if the board takes that decision and withholds approval of the application for 30 days, at the end of that 30-day period, you have another opportunity through a board resolution to withhold for a further 60 days. The downside there is that if the zoning bylaw doesn't proceed and is not adopted, the board's exposed to a risk and would be responsible for any costs that the applicant incurs in that period that's associated with withholding the building permit. So my suggestion would be that no further resolutions required, and that staff would bring forward these applications on a case-by-case basis as they arise to the board for a decision.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Sorry about that. Yeah. Had a lot on my mind tonight, I think. But I will do a report. I just really wanted to, I get it at our Lakeside Trail. They finished a section from Sunnyside Campground up to Entrance Bay. It is absolutely incredible. And I think it really speaks highly of the quality of work for our planning staff and our parks people and all those involved in building it. And it's great for the area and great for our region. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Director Castle.
Thank you, Chair Lum. Today we had a visit from Emergency Management Climate Readiness Minister Ma and Agriculture and Food Minister Alexis to the Hatzic Lake watershed, who came out in response to an invitation from the Hatzic Watershed Recovery Table, which Director Davidson and I are part of, as is Director Horn with his municipal hat on. The minister spent the better part of 4 hours learning firsthand the challenges of flood mitigation in the watershed, observing work that has already been done in response to the 2021 atmospheric river, and learning about potential opportunities for a collaborative approach to long-term solutions, which will hopefully bring some hope to the residents of the affected areas within electoral areas G and F, as well as within the city of Mission. There was a very positive tone among all of the participants today, which included representatives from Lacamo First Nation, the city of Mission, the Dewdney Area Improvement District, the FVRD, and various ministries, who all seem eager to work together to find solutions and to bring hope to the residents of the area. Many thanks to Ministers Ma and Alexis for spending time in our area today. I look forward to continuing to be part of the work that is underway to bring relief to the residents of the Hatzic watershed. Thanks.
Great. And thank you, Director Castle, for your advocacy and your work at that table as well, as Director Davidson and Director Horn. Director Pranger.
I would just like to thank Director Makahonik for the seminar that was held at the gathering place at UFB to highlight the violence against women, and appreciate all the work you put into it. And I know it was well received by a lot of people, and we certainly learned a lot through your advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Siemens, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to welcome Mayor Popoff to the Urban Mayors Caucus. So the 13 urban mayors caucus has now been expanded to the 17 urban mayors. And in his absence, he was elected as co-chair along with he agreed to it, mind you, along with the mayor of Victoria. So they're going to be the two co-chairs. And I believe that the city of Chilliwack is offering services for the first few months for the administrative and communication component. So again, just more advocacy. We're mental health, substance abuse, and treatment is the first. Public transit is the second. Affordable housing is the third, and the new fiscal framework is the fourth. So we're staying focused on those for advocacy. So it's just another example again of some of the horsepower that we're bringing to the table from the regional district. So some of the things that we will discuss with our mayor's caucus at this table will be brought to a bigger table. So just wanted to welcome Chilliwack aboard. I think it's 80,000 population or over, and so yeah, well, it'd be good to have some friends at the table.
And this is what happens. Let this be a warning if you're considering missing a meeting. That happens. Okay. Other directors, Director McIlphonic.
So I just wanted to report that our stakeholders meeting for rural homelessness and camps in the Chilliwack River Valley and Area E is progressing, and we're really seeing some great collaboration and some effectiveness, and actually getting some cleanup and actually getting people connected to housing. So quite pleased about that. Some accountability pieces that are really working. It's quite a large collaborative group, and with all the different ministries. So it's a really nice a model that I don't see anywhere else. So I'm really, really excited about it. And I think like many of you, so hot right now in May. It's a big fire concern. We've had 3 fires in the valley since Sunday. And so a little concerned, and just hoping that they actually do a campfire ban, not just the other bans. And I just wanted to say thank you to those that came out. We had Director Pranger, Director Smith, Director Johnson, and our CAO, Ms. Kinnaman, attend, and as well as many persons of influence on Tuesday. And just a statistic that I would like to bring forward, because this impacts everyone, and no, it doesn't respect any demographic, but in the last year, domestic violence has risen by 37% in our province, and femicides have gone up. The average is 12. Last year, we had 29 in BC, and we had many of them in our own community. So just want to make sure that this is on people's minds, and because it affects our staffing, our neighborhoods, our families, and I just want to bring awareness to that. So I really appreciate, and we had a lot of our Indigenous sisters come out too and support us. So just wanted to make sure that when these things come up, that people have some awareness around it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McCahonick. Thank you for your work. Director Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. Just an invitation to colleagues here. We have a Run for Water, which is one of the largest runs in British Columbia. We have people all over the province and from Washington State. And it's this May 28th. It's a Sunday, 8 o'clock. There's 5K and 10K. So any of you who have an interest in that, it's not competitive, so you don't have to feel badly if you do it slowly. But the money raised goes directly to build wells in Ethiopia. And it's an amazing cause, and it's quite moving to see that. I've been to Ethiopia myself, and I've seen the tragedy of the lack of water. We have, of course, a lot of water here. We don't even think about it here. But Run for Water, it's a wonderful cause, and I'd encourage you to come out if you're at all interested. It's May 28th. If you want to find out more, you can look on the site. There's a good website with all the information. And be great to see you there. I believe our mayor of Abbotsford is also going to be running it, so we'll look forward to seeing the mayor there. Thank you very much for allowing me to share this information tonight, Chair.
Thank you, Director Gibson. Director Lowen.
Thank you. I just want to return to the topic just before that, Director McCahonick, regarding the topic of domestic violence. And we've had some good news in the last week or so. Provincial government announcing I'm reading from their press release here, a three-story building providing second stage housing for women and children in a family-oriented development with 2-bedroom homes and programming space. So it'll be 12 new second stage homes for women and their children escaping domestic violence.
Thank you, Dr. Lowen. Other reports from board directors? Don't see any. Ms. Kinnaman, next item.
Moving down to public question period for items relevant to the agenda. It appears that we do not have any members of the public joining us in the boardroom this evening, but we'll just turn things over to our corporate officer, Jamie Van Ness, to check in online.
Ms. Van Ness.
Thank you. We do not have any members of the public joining us this evening online, and we have not received any written questions.
Thank you, Ms. Kinnaman. We're in a real predicament now.
Looking for a resolution to close the meeting.
Without Director Facio here, I'm not sure what we're going to do. Yeah. Director Barkman, Director Popov, all in favor, opposed if any. The item carries. Give us a
just
second.
Recess for 3 or 4 minutes. That'd be great.